I'm Tyler Chrestman, and welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Today we're going to be talking about Jeff Goldblum, one of my favorite Hollywood celebrities. No sarcasm there. That guy is awesome. He got into a little bit of trouble this past week because he was a guest on RuPaul's Drag Race. Drag show? I think it's RuPaul's Drag Race is the name of the show. Yes, and before we even get into commenting on what happened and this and that, what we're going to do first is we're actually just going to play the clip that got him into trouble, and then we're going to talk about it. So here we go real quick. We're going to just play this.
That visibility for people of religious minorities need to have in this country. Isn't this?
So for those who can't see the video, one of the contestants came out wearing a Stars and Stripes. The theme, I guess, for the episode was patriotism or being patriotic, and came out with a Stars and Stripes hijab. So this is Jeff Goldblum talking about that.
It's an interesting wrinkle, though. Is there something in that religion that is anti-homosexuality and anti-woman? How does that complicate the issue? I'm just raising it and thinking out loud and maybe being stupid, but
no.
What do you think?
I think, drag has always shaken the tree, so to speak. And there are so many different layers to this presentation. And if they...
that other person talking at the end was actually RuPaul. So that was the clip right there. Basically, he came on and said, isn't there something inherently gay and inherently anti-woman about that religion? And doesn't that sort of throw an interesting wrinkle into everything, because you are obviously doing a drag show, which by its nature is not anti-woman and anti-gay. It is basically embracing those things as much as you could be. And he was making a point that isn't Islam inherently against these things. So it's kind of an interesting thing you're doing here by trying to embrace the hijab as a part of it. Obviously, people then began to say Jeff Goldblum is a bigot, he's an Islamophobe, he needs to be canceled, and all the other nonsense that we have come to expect from the internet. Here are a couple hot takes from people on Twitter that I thought I'd just like to highlight here. And this is one of the quotes. I don't watch this show, but I keep seeing this clip, and it's Islamophobic and dangerous, period. Islam, like all religions, has significant progress to do in embracing intersectionality, but at its core, it's a religion of tolerance, end of quote. Then this other person, Omar Sekar, apparently he's an artist and designer. He said, quote, Jeff Goldblum felt the need to say, but isn't Islam anti-gay and anti-woman to Jackie because she was wearing a Stars and Stripes hijab, as if America hasn't been anti-gay and anti-woman from the outset, or killed and displaced millions of Muslims, including women and queers, end quote. Okay, this seemed to be a lot of the take that people on Twitter had. This is very common with people on the left on this particular topic. This is classic whataboutism. They don't embrace the actual issue. What they say is, well, what about this? What about that? What about America? What about other religions? So this is nonsense, because first of all, if you're trying to say as if America hasn't been anti-gay and anti-woman from the outset, okay, if you were gay in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, or back in the 1700s, yeah, I would agree with you. America was not great. But we're talking about 2020. And if you're going to tell me America isn't probably, arguably, the best place in the world to be gay, I don't know what you're talking about. Because we're going to talk about this in just a second. But I'm not interested in arguing about America of the past. I'm interested in talking about today. I just like when people talk about Christianity. I'm not interested in talking about the Christianity of 1400 or 1500 where we were, as if I'm one of them, when the Christians were persecuting other people. I'm talking about 2020. And Christianity on a whole has some fundamentalists, but it's not the same as the Islamic world right now. So here's the next thing I'm going to show, which is a chart here, which was taken by CNN back in, I think this was from a couple years ago. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact year right in front of me. But here we go. I want everyone to take a look at this chart real quick. Now, these are the legal status for same-sex activity around the world. Now, what you will notice about this chart is that the West, North America, South America, and Europe, as well as Australia, are all in blue, which means that they recognize same-sex marriage and civil unions, or at least same-sex civil unions or marriage, one or the other. They are all blue. The entirety of North America is blue, with the exception of just a little bit of Central America, the majority of Southern America, almost all of Europe and Australia. Now look at the places where this map is red. Look at Africa. Look at specifically Northeast Africa and the Middle East. Now, the only places in the world that carry death sentences for homosexuality happen to all be majority Muslim countries. The majority of the countries in the Middle East, almost all of them in fact, have either jail time sentences or laws that prohibit homosexuality. There's only a couple that even have de facto criminalization, but they say, oh, you know, we don't necessarily have laws on the books, but it's heavily frowned upon. None of them are blue. There's no blue, with the exception of South Africa. There's no blue in Africa, and absolutely no blue in the Middle East. Now, and the only places you're going to find death sentences are in the Middle East and, again, Northeast Africa, which, again, those are majority Muslim countries right there. Now, this is not to say that this is only a problem in Islam. There are some countries on that list you'll see that are would be considered Catholic or Christian countries, but it is a gigantic problem in Islam that Jeff Goldblum is not wrong in raising. This has always been my biggest problem when people want to use this whataboutism. Well, what about America? What about the treatment of women and minorities in America? You have no perspective on life if that is actually what you think. If you think America is the leader in evil in the world, you have no perspective. Iran has hanged somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 gay men and lesbian women since 1979. So since the 80s, Iran has killed up to 6,000 gays in their country by hanging. Okay? So in the last 40 years, while the United States, the biggest battle in the United States was, would we legalize same-sex marriage? Countries in the Middle East like Saudi Arabia and Iran still kill gays. And there are things, before gay marriage, there was a giant argument that gays didn't have the same rights as everyone else in this country. That's not true today. It isn't. There's not a law that prevents. Okay, we'll take this back a little bit. We're not perfect. America is not perfect, but it is the best place. We are making the most progress. The West in general. I won't even say America specifically. The West in general, whether it's Canada, the United States, or western parts of Europe, are the most tolerant places in the entire world to be. When you do polls in the Middle East, Pew has done extensive research about this. When you do polls in the Middle East on things like, on liberal topics, whether it's homosexuality, the treatment of women, things like apostasy. So this is a great one, for example. Apostasy, which is somebody who is a Muslim leaving the faith. The majority of Muslims polled in the Middle East think that should be punishable by death. This is according to Pew. Now you can look into these research, into these articles. Pew is a incredibly reputable, probably the best polling data we have in the world on a number of topics. This is a gigantic problem because liberals in the West who claim to stand up for the minorities, that claim to stand up for the people who don't have a voice for themselves. Liberals have a blind spot when it comes to this unique problem. Again, they want to talk about Christianity, but the West was fighting a battle between should we legalize gay marriage or not, and the most extreme Christians on the other side would say we shouldn't do it because it is bad for the family, and you guys are sinners, you're going to go to hell. Nobody in the West was advocating that we should start criminalizing homosexuality or murdering gays. No one en masse. You can cherry pick and find some crazy person who probably said this, but no one en masse ever made that point in the last 40 years. While in the Middle East, this is not even a conversation. The overwhelming majority of people polled in the Middle East they do not approve of homosexuality. They think it should be criminalized, and a strong support for the death penalty for these kind of things. When it comes to apostasy, for example, we talked about this. The majority of people in the Middle East who are polled think that it should be punished by death. You're not allowed to leave the faith in the Middle East. You will be murdered. And this is the problem with liberals in the West, is they pretend that they care about things, but because intersectionality rules the day, you can't criticize someone who's a minority in the West. Islam is not a minority. It is this world's second largest religion, 1.6 billion Muslims on the planet, behind only Christianity. It's one of the largest religions in the world. But because Muslims, for example, in the U.S., they're a minority, then liberals think that everything needs to be protected, and any criticism of the faith is Islamophobic. It's not. It's not Islamophobic to point out that liberals who claim to be for things like the equal treatment of gays and women and free speech and the freedom to practice religion or practice no religion, those things that they stand up for in the West, they turn a blind eye in the Middle East. And the people who suffer because of this blind eye are actual other Muslims. The majority of people who are killed in the Middle East for these crimes of apostasy, homosexuality, adultery, those kind of things, they're Muslims. And the West turns a blind eye. The liberals who pretend to be for minorities turn a back on the most the most vulnerable minorities in the world, the people in the Islamic world who are unable to escape. And this is why empowering reformers in the West is the most important thing we can do. So people like Ali Rizvi or Majid Nawaz, Faisal Al-Mutar, these people are heroes. And they need to be, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, my personal hero, Ayaan Hirsi Ali. These people need voices. And instead what the West does is they try to deplatform people like that. They'll accuse, the Southern Poverty Law Center will list Ayaan Hirsi Ali and Majid Nawaz on their list of anti-Muslim extremists, bigots, as if the most important people in the world right now aren't the people who are trying to reform Islam from the inside. Someone like Majid Nawaz in particular. He just won a lawsuit. I think he won $3 million or something like that from the Southern Poverty Law Center. He sued him for libel, and he won because what that institution, which used to be one of the most important things for liberals in the West, has deteriorated into nonsense. And this is the problem. This is going to be one of the biggest problems in the future, is this idea that we have to be able to talk about bad ideas, and we have to be able to do that honestly. If we can't talk about the fact that there is something inherently anti-gay and anti-woman in Islam right now today, and we can't have that honest conversation, then we're never going to get past the problem. We're never going to fix the problem whatsoever. And that is a big issue. It is not small. And here, it's ridiculous that I have to do this, but let me do it. Let me just throw a bone out to people who will attempt to paint this in a bad light. No one in the world should be bigoted against Muslims as people. You should not dislike someone because of their religion. You should not dislike someone because of their skin color. You should engage them on the level of ideas. There are plenty of Muslims that you know in the West, your neighbors, your friends, people who do not take this fundamentalist or even ultra-conservative version of Islam seriously. They don't have regressive views on gays and women and freedom of speech. They don't want to restrict those kind of things. They just live their life like everybody else. Like most Christians in this country who would claim to be Christian, but yet they follow a very loose interpretation of the Bible, or they make it form to whatever they want. Your Catholics who don't mind taking their birth control, for example. It is the cafeteria Catholics, picking and choosing what you want to follow and what you don't. That is the way a lot of Muslims in the West who we engage with every day act. And that's fine. That's great, actually. That's fantastic. But that's not the representative of Islam throughout the world. If there are, I'd have to look this up, but something like 3 million Muslims in the United States. That sounds low, but for some reason that number's sticking out in my head. If there's 3 million Muslims in the United States, and all of them, every single one of them, embraced Western values entirely, that still is not a good representative sample size of 1.6 billion people. And that's what people have a hard time not understanding. You know, your friend down the street who has grown up in the West and is practicing Muslim is not representative of the other, the 100 million Muslims who live in Iran who support laws that kill gays and against apostasy. These are real people, and this is a real problem. And it's specific to this religion right now. It's not that Christianity didn't have these problems, and there are people who still think that homosexuality is a sin. Obviously, a lot of Christians still think that, but nobody in a large scale Western country is calling for things like killing gays. It's not a thing. And nobody is calling. Most people, we're not even having a serious conversation about criminalizing gay marriage again. When was the last time you heard people on Fox News even talking about this issue? No one cares right now. And so it's ridiculous to use this whataboutism to point to other people. So should Jeff Goldblum be canceled? No. He didn't say anything wrong. First of all, he wasn't accusing I actually don't know. I don't know the pronouns that this person prefers, but he or she, I guess, I don't know. He wasn't accusing the performer of anything. He asked, isn't it interesting, because you think of that being inherently anti-woman and inherently gay, and isn't that an interesting wrinkle in this whole thing because it adds another layer? And everyone immediately jumps to, he's obviously a bigot. First of all, I believe Jeff Goldblum's a Jew, so if anyone in the world should be a little critical of Islam, it's people of the Jewish faith. The majority of the Islamic countries around the only Jewish state in the world have tried to destroy it since its inception. So it's okay to be a little sensitive. But no, Jeff Goldblum shouldn't be canceled. Jeff Goldblum raised an interesting point on a show, and that's it. And if people want to jump down his throat and call him an Islamophobe or a racist or a bigot, first of all, Islam isn't a race. So that's not a good thing for people to be saying. There's nothing that says you have to be brown to be a Muslim. And Islamophobia is just a ridiculous term in general. But if you want to call him a bigot, I think you need to do some reading. I think you need to do some research. There's nothing about Jeff Goldblum that is bigoted. It's an interesting point he was trying to make. We're going to move on to a different section here. I have some questions from the last video about Trump and the disinfectant. And I want to just real quick touch on a couple of those. The first one was, do you think there would be such a media bias if Trump was more articulate? No. I was going to say yes, but then I said I'm going to say no. I think that they would still be incredibly biased against him. I think they would just have a harder time painting a better picture. So there is obviously a very strong conservative media bias against Obama. But it was hard to make Obama look stupid all the time because he was so articulate. Now, the conservative bias against Obama was incredibly high. People didn't like him at all. I think the bias against Trump would still exist. It would just be harder to make him look foolish all the time. He says things that are just foolish, and it makes it really easy for the media to play that up. The disinfectant one was just a prime example. So, yes, I think the bias would still exist. It would just be harder to frame it in a way that is so hurtful to his image. But it's a good question. And the other one, which I liked, was, how would you respond to Trump's explanation that his comments were, quote, a very sarcastic question to the reporters in the room, end quote? That's obviously just a lie. It's clearly a lie. I don't know why he said it. He lies a lot. So I understand why he would say that. He's trying to backpedal. He shouldn't have backpedaled. He should have been like, look, I was asking questions to my person over here. I'm not a medical expert. I said consult your medical experts. The fact that you guys are playing this up is because you're incredibly biased against me, and you're actually doing exactly what you said I did, which is sowing disinformation to the people. So you're actually doing the thing that you're accusing me of, and that's no good. There's so many better ways to handle things like this, and just doubling down or lying is not the best tactic. So I don't know why. I mean, I do know why he did it, but it's always a terrible strategy. I'll never understand exactly why he does it. But those are a couple good questions I had on the last video, which I wanted to real quick address here. I think that's it for the day. I think we're going to leave it there. And everyone, again, thank you. The last video especially got a lot of really good feedback and some excellent questions. I want to thank everyone who took the time out to watch it. And always, I have a new Facebook page for the Chrestman conversation. Sharing the videos on there apparently is better than just doing it on my Facebook page for a whole bunch of reasons I don't necessarily need to go into because they're kind of boring. They're analytic kind of stuff that it gives you access to a whole bunch of tools I didn't know existed. So I'm going to be posting videos on there and then sharing them. So if you don't mind going and giving that page a like, that'd be great. As well as the YouTube channel. As always, the subscribers and views always help. We're going to leave it there. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Tyler Chrestman signing out.